I think we started, but it didn't do the usual countdown. But anyway, I hope we're good to go.
Well, it
Uh,
says it's live.
it says it's
Um,
live, but
George,
we'll.
did you pay the intro tax? Maybe they're waiting for.
I'm troubled immediately by the fact that somehow the YouTube is. Oh, no, all right, we've got some YouTube viewers. All right, so we haven't yet been blocked on YouTube.
Should
Anyway,
we let's put a stopwatch on that. Okay.
that's right. Um, Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. It is time for our weekly live stream. So, welcome everybody who has joined us.
Yeah, and at 50 seconds in, we have more people than we had for an hour and a half last week.
That's right. So far, where YouTube has not blocked, which is we just keep our fingers because we don't want to do any jinxing. I think last week we jinxed something, and I think at one moment, yeah, I jinxed it. I said, "Hey, everything is going smoothly," and you said, I think you're going to jinx it, and boom, within seconds, I did indeed jinx it. But anyway, how are you, Peter?
I'm doing very well. Spring is struggling to make its presence known, but I'm pleased. I was thinking during the day, George, as the news was coming out, I think that you have a shot at the French presidency. Okay, I think the field is opening up. I give it a try. I mean, a French person was running Georgia for a long time. I mean, why can't you? Okay,
Yes,
and you have
that's
multiple
right.
passports. You're a man of the world.
That's
Paris
right.
is a world city.
That's right.
I support George Samueli for
For
president.
French president,
I would like
exactly.
to see some comments
Yeah,
from
I
our
have some.
followers.
My French isn't great, but who
Ah,
cares? I don't think Salome Zourabichvili, her Georgian wasn't particularly great either. So, and then we had the Georgian leader Saakashvili, and then he sort of joined the Ukrainian politics. I don't think he knew very much Ukrainian
he did.
either.
I always give Saakashvili he was linguistically very talented. That is true.
Is
Okay,
that right?
I saw him speaking Russian. It was very good. Okay,
Okay, okay.
and I've
So
heard
maybe.
people tell me that his Ukrainian, which is it's not that hard to be fluent in Ukrainian if you speak Russian. Okay.
Okay, all right. So he knew that. Well, but then that's and now we call that um, correctly. I think it was obvious yesterday when we did our podcast about the French election that, of course, they would find um, Marine Le Pen guilty, and not only that, they would immediately say she's banned from running for any office, and that of course means the presidency. She's banned for 5 years, and it is kind of interesting. I mean, here's the. Let me just have uh, the stories that appeared today. Very everyone's very um, excited. Okay, let me just dig that. All right. Let me find the appropriate. Um, yes. Okay. So this technology is really it's very sophisticated.
Well, I mean, if you're finding it, George, I mean, I'll
Yes,
fill in a little
I've
bit.
got it.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
this trial was followed very closely because it was obviously an echo of the
Yeah.
kind of lawfare that Donald Trump experienced.
Well,
Okay, you don't have to
exactly.
like Donald Trump, you don't have to like or dislike Donald Trump, but he was a victim of lawfare.
That's
Marine
right.
Le Pen is the same thing. You can like her or dislike her, okay,
That, that,
but
that,
she's a
that,
victim of
that's right.
lawfare.
Exactly, because everything that she's accused of is something that's what politicians do. Oh, she was somehow using EU money, EU parliamentary money for political purposes. So the people working for her were allegedly doing political work, but not EU
How do you make
work.
the distinction, George?
I don't know how one makes a
I'm not
distinction.
trying to put you on the spot, but I
No,
mean,
I
seriously.
yeah, I don't know how one makes a distinction. I mean, she's obviously the leader of a political party, a major political party in France. She's in the European Parliament. I am sure that the people who are working for her are working to advance her cause. So it's going to be very hard to say, well, oh, this is European parliamentary work, and this is work as a political leader. But here you have this Le Pen faces immediate ban from public office. And then here it says today she was found guilty of siphoning 474,000 euros to pay four of these assistants. That's not a
And
huge money. I mean,
and
because this is over a number of years, so it's not
and
not. Yeah. So what was that?
and so you're going to
Yeah.
bar her from leading candidate to win
Yeah.
the next French presidential. You're going to bar her over this. I wonder how many European MPs, how many secretaries they have. They have 4, 5, 15.
That's right.
What do they do? Did they all do clerical work for you? Really? Really?
Exactly.
Really? Come on.
That's right.
Oh, and the EU is out of pocket 474,000 euros. They're out of pocket.
Yeah.
I wonder how much the EU is really out of pocket when you come to these.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have all these EU officials constantly traveling, constantly, staying in the swankiest hotel. That apparently is not misappropriation of public funds.
The EU, by definition, is misappropriation of public. That's its
Exactly.
purpose.
That's
Everybody, it's
That's
a
it.
grift.
That's right.
It's a massive grift.
Grift, exactly. And it says here, Le Pen is guilty of complicity in embezzlement during her tenure as party president between 2011 and 2016, involving a total of 1.8 million. So again, 1.8 million euros over a 5-year period. It's not a huge amount of money, given that the consequences are that you're preventing her from running for the presidency, in which she's ahead in the polls. She's leading the polls, so that you're removing the leading candidate. Now they did this in Romania. They removed Georgescu. They're threatening to arrest the leader of the Republika Srpska. They tried to pull this stunt in Georgia. It's becoming a pattern whereby.
What about Our Lady in Gagauzia?
And then of course Our Lady in Gagauzia, who is in prison. And it's always some vague corruption. It's always they bring up. It's always something that it sounds like just about every politician does, and so it's always this corruption. And lo and behold, you were in prison. And incidentally, she has been sentenced to prison. I mean, Le Pen has been sentenced. I mean, it's not immediate. Doesn't go into effect. This goes into effect immediately. Her prison term doesn't go into effect immediately. So this is Politico. And then Marine Le Pen's plans to run for French presidency in 2027 were dealt a likely fatal blow Monday after she was found guilty of embezzling European Parliament funds and deemed ineligible to stand in elections for the next 5 years.
George, you probably would know this, okay? All members of the European Parliament, every single one of them is being investigated for the same thing right now, right?
I'm sure. I am sure. Yeah, absolutely.
When I read these headlines, everyone, I just can't help but just laugh myself into tears. Right. I mean, look, every single election since 2016, there's always some kind of Russian meddling, a claim of it, or it's there, but we don't see it.
That's right.
Okay, and look, the French authorities themselves are destroying European democracy. Like Russia, even if it had ever intended to do that, the Russians have nothing on what the Romanians are doing, what the French are doing, what the Georgians are doing. What the Moldovans are doing. Who's breaking up liberal democracy?
That's right.
In the liberal West. It's not Russia. No. It's these liberal elites. Okay,
that's right.
That to me is what it means. What I tell you, it means.
That's right. And she herself was accused of being involved with Russia. I remember that was a big thing. That was through 2016, 2017. This went on for years. The accusation that she was somehow getting money.
She was getting money from Russian entities.
That's right, exactly. That's right. That's right, but of course she wasn't. I think she borrowed some money, and then they say, well, this bank has some links to Russia and so on. So again, there was no evidence at all that any Russian government money filled the coffers of her party. And then, of course, we had all the things about her. Oh, the she would face criminal prosecution over tweets that she sent out. So they've been after her for a long time. Also, it's interesting that she's actually a very moderate figure. I mean, the
She's
whole thing.
become no,
She's far right.
she's become more
She's
moderate
become
over the
moderate.
years.
She's curtailed almost
Oh,
all.
come on. It's fair to say, George, irrespective of Politico and all that other nonsense, she's mainstream now.
She's very mainstream. Yeah. That's right. Mainstream. I mean, she's supporting NATO. She's a NATO supporter. She condemns Russia. And all the talk about she wants to withdraw from NATO, that's all gone. And whatever the issue, she first takes out a position, and then at the moment she's condemned, she then quickly sort of moves back into the mainstream position. So it's very interesting that even when you do all of that, it's still not good enough. They still want to
it's
prevent her
interesting
from running.
too. It's interesting too. Even while George and I have largely dismissed the traditional political spectrum of left right, I think it's really kind of it kind of gives you a target, but it's not really meaningful anymore. But having said that, does this happen? How often does this happen to the populist left? It only happens to the populist right.
Right.
It's one. It's always in one direction. How is that? How does that happen?
That's right. No, so it really is, because it happened. Georgescu, the Romanian, that's exactly what happened to him. Again, a very moderate person. I mean, they tried to make.
He was cut from the. He was. How many EU institutional slots did he have?
That's
I
right.
mean,
yeah, that's right.
I mean, before his run, he was for outsiders like George and I, he's kind of a nominal, get along, go along, Euro guy. I mean, that's what he looks like on paper.
That's right. And he worked at the United Nations doing something like sustainable development. One of these things that they like. And so, but even that, even that, it posed too much of a threat. Anyway, the Politico article, it goes on. This is it. That's it. Typically in France, punishments handed down after guilty verdict are delayed until the appeals process has concluded. But the 3-judge panel that heard the case took the extraordinary step of immediately enacting the ban on running for public office, which prosecutors had deemed necessary based on the gravity of Le Pen's crimes. Well, that's very interesting. They immediately did this. She has all kinds of appellate procedures that she has yet to even embark on, let alone exhaust. And the punishment goes into effect right away, which means that even if the conviction is overturned, and that takes time, that's not going to happen tomorrow. Even if the conviction is overturned, she will be prevented from running for the presidency. That's convenient.
Oh yeah. So, I mean, the amount of resources you can throw at her defense, probably will win. But when? The day before the election, the day after the election,
right? The French, the French judicial system, that it doesn't. No judicial system works fast, but the French judicial system is especially notoriously slow. Le Pen was also fined 100,000 euros and sentenced to 4 years in prison, 2 of which were suspended. Not exactly suspended; it's under home arrest. So two in the NIC. 2 under home arrest. And then the judges did not rule that those penalties take immediate effect, so they could be delayed by a possible appeal. Well, that's convenient. So they can delay that by appeal, but they can't delay her being ineligible to run for office. And then Anyway, then this says the harshest punishments were reserved for Le Pen, as she was accused of participating in the scheme both as a former MEP and then running it as the party's ex-president. If Le Pen is unable to successfully appeal the verdict before the next presidential election, the national rally is likely to look to this Jordan Bardella, the party's loyal 29-year-old president, to step in. But of course, that's the purpose. They know they can beat him. He's very inexperienced, he's very young, he's very inexperienced. He's likely to be quite easy to beat. And there's the Guardian also, which has the Le Pen 56 said before the verdict that any immediate ban on running for election would be like a political death sentence, and the judges had the power of life or death over our movement. And then judges handed Le Pen a 5-year ban on running for public office with the added provision that it would take immediate effect. It will apply even if she appeals. So it doesn't matter, that
she's they've closed all the doors. There's no escape.
That's right. But again, it says neither the prison penalty nor the fine would be applied until her appeals are exhausted. That's very nice.
The ban on running for office.
That's right. That's the one that goes into effect. The rest, the fine and the prison. No, that doesn't matter. Here it says. Le Pen, including they were found guilty of a vast scheme over many years to embezzle European Parliament funds by using money earmarked for European Parliament assistance to instead pay party workers in France. The so-called fake job scheme covered by parliamentary assistant contracts between 2004 and 2016, so it's 12 years, and was unprecedented in scale and duration.
Wow. This is the Guardian, right?
That's the Guardian, yes.
Yeah, they're clutching their pearls, aren't they?
That's right. Yeah, it's unprecedented scale, duration, causing losses of $4.5 million.
I just have to wonder, how much is the French state spent on prosecuting Le Pen?
Yes, easily more than this.
Easily.
Yeah, yes. And then Viktor Orban sent out this tweet today: "Je suis Marine." And then there's the New York Times, which then says that Although I love this sentence, which says the verdict effectively barred the current frontrunner in the 2027 presidential election from participating in it, an extraordinary step, but one the presiding judge said was necessary because nobody's entitled to immunity in violation of the rule of law. But it still doesn't explain, if you haven't exhausted your appeals process, why do you get punished immediately? And particularly in this way, namely denying.
Isn't it a violation of law to bar or put up impediments to appeal? That's not. That's a violation of the law.
I think so. I mean, you have your rights to appeal, and in fact, if you're fined, you don't have to pay your fine. I mean, normally the way it works, the way it works in the United States, you have to put up bond. But while the appeals process is pending, you put up bond. You don't not necessarily the whole sum, but you put up something. But a punishment that goes into effect, and it cannot, you can't in any way remedy it, even throughout the appeals process, that seems to me really fundamentally violative of any kind of civil liberties.
Yeah, well, the mask is off.
Right.
They're making it clear they don't want this person to run. Okay,
that's right.
They're using the judiciary to cancel out the possibility of the French electorate to express its franchise. Like, it's as simple as, everybody admits it, even Politico and people like that. So, It's just so shameful. It's all out in the front, but it's good for the rules-based order and all this other nonsense.
That's right. Rules-based order.
Be careful what you wish for, because Madame Le Pen is more popular now than she was yesterday.
Yes, that's right. But that's very interesting because it's rules-based order. There are no rules here. I mean, clearly, you're getting judges who are deciding whom you can vote for. All bad habits, they start in the United States. It was the Americans who started this with Donald Trump. They came up with this idea, hey, we can keep Donald Trump from running. What they forgot about is that ultimately the Supreme Court stepped in and said that you can't do this. You can't just simply, some judge somewhere decides that the voters don't have a say in who will be their candidate. But here they've decided, hey, look what the Americans did. Look what this is very cute. Why don't we do that here? And that is now the Romanians took that lesson. The Romanians started it. Now the French are doing this. It's very interesting. The whole thing has been staged. I mean, they started this. The prosecutors, they suddenly raised this issue only last November. Hey, why don't we prevent her from running? That'll be the punishment. And then, as we discussed yesterday, then there was this ruling from the Constitutional Court, which said, hey, that the ineligibility to run, that could go into effect despite all the appeals process not being exhausted. And lo and behold, they used that principle against Marine Le Pen. That's very cute.
Meanwhile, further east, you have a man in Ukraine who claims to be president, and his term expired. But never mind. It's okay.
No. That's right. Never mind.
It's
yes.
Okay.
Yes. That itself is very interesting because, to a man or woman, all the media outlets repeat, you can't have elections while there is martial law. It's in the Constitution. We looked at the Constitution. I remember we did this here on the Gaggle. We looked at the Constitution. Where does it say that you can't have elections during martial law? It's not in the Constitution. This is just made up. And then everybody repeats it, and the media just repeat one another. And they say, well, you can't have elections. It's martial law. It's what they did. They did declare martial law, and they said during martial law, we're not going to have any elections. But that has nothing to do with the Constitution. They just simply, they just made that up upon declaring martial law. You could absolutely have elections. It's nothing to do with the Constitution, but you have to just keep repeating this.
Well, and now you get into this very weird, like catch-22 environment. So here is a person that claims to be president, though his term is expired. So his ability to legitimately do something in a position that he no longer legally holds. So he says, we're going to call an election. So, well, it's because he is illegitimate legally under the Constitution. What powers does he have to call an election? You see what I mean? I mean, it's
right.
all short-circuited.
Right. That's right. That's right. And that's right. But it's very interesting. I mean, we talk a lot about this rules-based order and values. And speaking of values, I wanted to bring this up. This came up a few days ago. Estonia, the former country, the little country that gave us Kaya Kalas, basically it's just banned Russians from voting. Basically said you can't vote. This has aroused almost no interest at all in the West. None. This is values. So so there were just a couple of wire stories, and that's about it. So if you just look at this here. This is the story is in the Moscow Times, but essentially it was a wire story in the Moscow. It says Estonian MPs pass bill to limit voting rights for Russian minority. Well, that's democratic. And says Estonian lawmakers voted Wednesday to ban the country's large Russian minority and other non-EU residents from voting in local elections.
Oh, yeah. I like that. And other non-European residents. With all three of them? I mean, you see how the linguistic game, it's like this really group of people. I mean, non-EU residents. Okay,
That's right. That's right.
All three of them. Okay.
Yes. And then notice how the sentence, this is a wire story, AFP, as the Baltic state warily eyes Moscow. So it's all Moscow's fault. So the right away, in that opening sentence, they justify the ban on democracy. The amendment was proposed in response to security concerns over Russia's war in Ukraine. Security concerns, yeah. Estonia has been a steadfast supporter of Kiev since the invasion on February 2022. In the vote on Wednesday, 93 lawmakers in the 101 seat chamber backed a constitutional amendment to impose the restrictions, a result that was met with applause from MPs.
Oh, so they're applauding political apartheid.
That's right.
That's what it is.
Estonian Prime Minister Kristen Michal. I haven't seen her. I guess she's the new Kaja Kallas.
Yeah. She's the new political Barbie of the Baltic states. Yeah.
Exactly. Hailed the outcome as, quote, a victory for all.
Well, except for the Russian minority.
Right. The disenfranchised minority, yes, it's a victory for all. Adding on X, quote, the decisions in our local life won't be made by citizens of the aggressor states, but we'll decide by ourselves.
Well, everyone, let's go down history lane. There was an illegal, there was a coup in Kiev in February 2014. Immediately after that, what happened? You had Lugansk, Donetsk. They said, we're out of here. Because we voted for Yanukovych. Yep. He was our president. Yep. And you have summarily dismissed him illegally.
Second time they did it. Yeah. They did it in 2004.
And there was an agreement before the coup that there would be political reform. George and I know what that means. Okay, that means they're going for the jugular. Okay, yep. But anyway, the elections were supposed to happen in December of that year. Well, that went all to the wayside. They created a prime minister illegally in the parliament. They didn't have a quorum. The constitutional court wasn't even. They didn't have enough judges to have some kind of quorum there. Okay, and so what happened? I'm getting to the point. The Russians, ethnic Russians, Russian speakers, they said, we're out of here. Yep. I mean, we're out of here. Well, I think in Estonia, somebody can fact check me here live. It's about 23% of the population of Estonia is Russian.
Something like that, yeah.
Well, maybe they'll say we're out of here.
Yep. Yep.
Huh? Well,
that's right.
Is that what you want? Is that what you want? These people no longer have any kind of legal stakeholding in Estonia. So why shouldn't they want to go it alone? Okay?
Right.
And this is I'm not saying they should do it. I'm not suggesting they should do it. But there are precedents all over the place where you disenfranchise people.
That's right. But I just always find this just fascinating how the media because that's why I brought this up, that in the case of Ukraine, they always repeat this thing about, martial law, we can't possibly have elections. They just repeat this. And here, this is clearly a disenfranchisement. I mean, imagine if Viktor Orban had done something like this. I mean, the media would just be going insane. This would be front page stories in The Guardian and Political day after day.
Is there a Romanian? Orban. How large is the Romanian minority in Hungary?
Well, it's not particularly large. It's more the other way around. It's the Hungarians who are a substantial minority in Romania. Hungary is actually quite ethnically homogeneous. But even if he tried, he tried to disenfranchise somebody, then they would just go absolutely, that would be crazy. And here, what if it's the Russians? They're eyeing the Russians warily. So it's justifiable to take these measures.
You have to understand, before the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russians lived in all three of the Baltic republics. Right. They grew up there. They went. They went to Russian language schools. The official language was Russian. though I'm not aware, maybe George, you can correct me here. There was no suppression of the indigenous languages. Okay,
No,
just
I don't think so at all.
the
There's no,
official language is Russian.
yeah,
Okay, you can
yes,
walk, you can go, you can sit in a cafe and speak Lithuanian. God help you, it's a hard language. I tried it.
right, right,
Okay, but that wasn't barred whatsoever.
right,
You went to the post office, you had to use Russian.
right, right.
Okay,
That's right.
and so these people were born there.
Right. Yes, that's right. Well, now the thing is that when you said that Russian was an official language, but I think that these others were also official
No,
languages. I think like Lithuanian, Latvian, and Estonian. I think they were official languages in addition to Russian. I don't think it was only Russian was the official.
No.
So I think you
No, I mean,
even
what I'm just saying is that, I think to get a birth certificate, death certificate, it would be in Russian because it was one country, the Soviet Union.
right,
Okay,
right.
but I
But I
mean,
think yeah.
you go to a cafe and order coffee in Lithuanian. Yeah, so what?
Right. No, that's right. It's a, but it's kind of interesting when they constantly talk about this terrible hardships that they suffered, but they've never really been able to show any of the great hardships. Hardships were quite bad from 1939 through to 1941, when Stalin imposed his rule on the Baltic states. I mean, that was quite brutal. But after 1950, after Stalin's death, I think the life wasn't that bad for the Baltic states.
Well, I always, when I'm presented with that argument, I go along with George. Is that yeah, there was harsh treatment, but who wasn't harshly treated in the Soviet
Yes,
Union?
exactly.
It was it was pretty much spread around everyone. Okay,
Exactly. That's what's always denied, and so somehow they always want to say that the Soviet regime imposed this brutality specifically against the people like the Ukrainians, the Holodomor. Oh, the terror famine was imposed exclusively against the Ukrainians. No evidence whatever for that. I mean, anyone who's done any serious research, every scholar who's done it said no. The famine was bad in Ukraine. It was bad in Russia. It was bad in Kazakhstan. I mean, if anything, it was
and
worse in
and
Kazakhstan than it was in Ukraine.
and again, going against the mythology that we have around this tragedy, because it was a tragedy, but that was class directed. It wasn't national directed. Okay, it wasn't going after Ukrainians. It was
Right,
going
right,
after peasants.
right,
Okay,
right.
that's what it was
That's
all about.
well, that's right, and that's why it wouldn't have even made any sense. Why would they go against the Ukrainians? I mean, the Bolsheviks kind of created Ukraine. I mean, it's their baby, it's their project. I mean, well, originally it was the Austrians, and then it was the Germans who took up this idea of creating this entity called Ukraine. But the Bolsheviks embraced this and thought this would be very cute in suppressing essentially Russian nationalism, which is what they really hated and were
Hated
most
it.
afraid of, Russian nationalism. So that's why they created this Ukraine as a bulwark against Russian nationalism. So it wouldn't make any sense for them suddenly to turn around and want to suppress Ukrainian nationalism.
That's why I think it was in 1945, well known among Russians, is that Stalin toasted the Russian
Yes,
people,
that's
which,
right.
so what? Well, that could land you in prison for a long, long prison term if you said
Right.
that before Stalin said it,
That's right.
okay? Because,
That's it.
as George has pointed out, it was called Russian chauvinism. That's what they
That's a
called it.
greater Russian chauvinism. That's right.
And that was verboten. You could
That's
not
that's
praise Russian culture, the Russian nation. They were last in line. Okay. And so, yeah, I'm sorry, Estonia, you got the short end of the stick there for a while, but everybody got the short end of the stick. And
Yeah,
that's why I am
right.
glad the Soviet Union is gone.
That's right. That's
Most
right.
importantly, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union.
That's right. And that was the thing that and people always say this about how the anti-Semitism in the Soviet Union, but the fact that yes they closed down synagogues, but they repressed the Russian Orthodox Church far more brutally than they
Yeah,
ever
well, they shut down the
Jewish.
synagogues, they destroyed the churches.
They destroyed the churches. and that was and it was really very, very bad, because after all, the Russian Orthodox Church is part and parcel of Russian nationalism, and you can't have Russian nationalism without the Russian Orthodox Church, and that's why they went after the Russian Orthodox Church with a particular cruelty and brutality. I mean, they closed them down, they tore them down, like the famous cathedral in Moscow, the whatever was this, the old Savior or whatever, which then it was rebuilt in the 1990s.
Before you say it, George, can anybody write in the chat what they replaced the church with? Does anybody know? This was the most important Orthodox church in Russia. It was demolished, and what replaced it? Any takers?
All right, write it exactly. Write it down. It's a very, very interesting. That's a very interesting story about what they replaced it with.
I've been there recently. It is just exquisite. It just absolutely exquisite. I don't know. Somebody must have saved the plans, or somebody just had a damn good memory, because it's pristine. They turned it into a swimming pool. That's what they did.
But what they intended to build the Palace of the Soviets. So it was going to be this huge monstrosity, the Palace of the Soviets, and on top of this,
the Empire State Building is like this. The palace we wanted to build is like this.
That's right. And right on top of it, on top of the Palace of the Soviets, they were going to have this giant statue of Lenin. So it was an enormous, ridiculous architectural project.
You know what? Do you know why they didn't build it?
I assume because it was just the project was just so gigantic.
It was way too expensive. I mean, they would have to devote like a third of the GDP into building it. Second of all, they said it would just seep into the ground. The surface wasn't strong enough to hold something of that weight. It would just slowly go into the ground.
But what was interesting about that is that it was built so sturdily that I think it was the Church of the Christ the Savior. It was built so sturdily they couldn't demolish it. They tried demolishing the way you demolish it, so they actually had to put in explosives. They put in explosives to blow it up.
And this is what the Bolsheviks were like. They gleefully filmed it.
But then they never built it, and so it was just this empty lot that was lying there year after year, this empty lot, until Khrushchev turned this into a swimming pool. And that's it. So that you had the great Church of the Christ of the Savior, and then it was replaced by a swimming pool. So that was the Bolsheviks. I mean, it's just going back to what we were saying, that when they say, oh, they treated the Baltic states very badly, that was only for a short period. After that, actually, the Baltic states did quite well. In the sort of post-Stalin era, the Baltic states did try well.
Well, everybody did. I mean, if you look at what again, I think it was part of the DNA of the communists is even after the passage of Stalin, promoting Russian culture, Russian civilization was this really frowned upon. Okay. And so what they did was they had an enormous investment projects like in Georgia, like in Armenia, like in Belarus, and the Baltic republics. Okay. I mean, I'm not going to whitewash what the NKVD or the KGB did in the Baltic republics, but you go there, there's a lot, it's Soviet built. I mean, a lot of this, I mean, you go to, like, for example, go to Tallinn. They've completely desovietized it and de-Russianized it because it's a small town. It's a town. It's a big town. It's not even a city. It's a big town. Okay. And you really get this kind of Nordic, feel, vibe to it all. It's very pretty. I think it's a beautiful city. But, as you go on the train to Tallinn, you see, yeah, I know that factory look because it's all over Russia. I know these metal grayling fences. Yep, that's universal through the entire land space. Okay, but when you get to like Tallinn, they've really just given it a complete remake. Okay, like I said, it's very beautiful. Okay, so to say that there was only. I mean, people would say the periphery lives better than the center, and there's a lot of truth to that.
I think so. I think so. I think they went out of their way um, in the Khrushchev and Brezhnev era to make life as as tolerable as possible for the Baltic states. Whatever they may, out of feelings of guilt or whatever, but they went out of the way to invest heavily in the Baltic states, much as Khrushchev went out of his way to help Ukrainians. And I don't think it's just because of his own, partially he, has a Ukrainian heritage, but he did go out of his way to help the Ukrainians. I mean, he forgave the wartime collaboration, which was quite a shocking thing to do. He forgave, basically there was an amnesty for wartime collaborators under Khrushchev, and the Banderavites returned to Ukraine, and he turned a blind eye to that. The
He
return
gave
of
them Crimea.
yeah,
Gave them Crimea.
he gave them Crimea exactly.
You know,
So
everyone, look, particularly just because I don't want to forget, when it's looking at the Baltic republics, again, I'm not going to whitewash anything, but why was the Soviet Union interested in the Baltic republics? For security, and security only.
yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. It was security, and it was in anticipation of the Hitlerian attack, which Stalin knew exactly. So the idea
It
that
happened.
Stalin trusted Hitler or nonsense. He didn't trust Hitler. He knew that was coming, so he needed to push his western borders as far to the west as he could. Hence the Baltic states. Hence his the taking of what now has become part of Ukraine. He moved the borders of Poland, and then he took a piece of Finland as well. All of that was about security. All of that was about to give the Soviets a buffer zone in anticipation of the invasion that he knew was coming, and that served its purpose. That could well have been, it was still touch and go as to whether the initial onslaught from the Wehrmacht was going to be defeated. So that it did buy Stalin some time in moving his borders westward. So yeah, that was that. Now,
Is the internet bad in Russia? No, internet is extremely good in Russia. Okay, we just want to point out to everyone: when you go to a public place, you go to a shopping mall, you go to a cafe, you go to a restaurant, internet is free. You never have to pay for it. Okay, so every once in a while, I'll see the comments. I'm more focused on the conversation. Okay.
So the other thing that was is quite interesting was Donald Trump's strange comments that he made in two different forums. He made these comments first to Kristen Walker of NBC, who's the
Meet the depressed.
Meet the Press, exactly, and
No,
then
meet
he
the
made some comments.
The depressed.
Meet the depressed. Yes, it's like the Trumpian. Was it? Is that Trumpian? Did he say meet the depressed or
I
something?
think it's Aaron Mate or
Okay,
Katie.
all right, yeah. Because he does when he says "face the nation." Trump turned it into "deface the nation." So, but anyway, so here we have. Let's see. First of all, let's look at what Kristen Walker said, and then we'll take a look at what he said on Air Force One. So here's Kristen Walker. Let's see if this is going to work.
I always get the impression she's had too much coffee. Yeah.
That's it. That's very good. That's astute. Yeah, you're right. She always seems amazingly excited.
Saturday, the president told me, quote, "I don't fire people because of fake news and because of witch hunts." Mr. Trump said he still has confidence in Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Just hours ago, President Trump called me to tell me he is, quote, "pissed off with Russia's President Putin" and threatened to impose secondary tariffs on Russia's oil. Quote, "If Russia and I are unable to make a deal on stopping the bloodshed in Ukraine, and if I think it was Russia's fault, which it might not be, but if I think it was Russia's fault, I am going to put secondary tariffs on all oil coming out of Russia." Mr. Trump said 25% tariffs on Russian oil could happen any moment and told me he plans to speak with President Putin this week. The president told me, quote, I was very angry, pissed off when Putin started getting into Zelensky's credibility and started talking about new leadership in Ukraine. On Iran, the president said he's also considering secondary tariffs if Iran doesn't agree to a nuclear deal. Quote, if they don't make a deal, there will be bombing, and it will be bombing the likes of which they have never seen before. After markets tumbled on.
So that's
I think if I were the camera, I would be afraid of her. She like lunges towards it.
but that was sort of interesting. So Trump called her up and imparted all of this, which makes it again sort of interesting. Then he sent out this truth. Yes, so he sent out immediately after the show. He sends out this truth and then he says there that Kristen Walker's entire first half hour of the lowly rated Meet the Fake Press this morning was devoted to the boring signal witch hunt. She doesn't want to talk in detail about anything that matters, like how well we are doing against the Houthis, substantive peace talks with Russia and Ukraine, or Iran. I don't know why did he say Iran?
I don't know either.
She wastes my administration's time by talking to them about nothing.
Why but Trump, didn't you call her?
That's right. That's so strange. Why can't NBC, one of the worst broadcasters on television, hire people that are honest and credible? The reason they don't is because their chairman, Brian Roberts, is a pathetic loser who's petrified of the left and always will be. Comcast's MSNBC and NBC have fought me for years, spending almost all of their waking hours making up fake stories. And look, I'm president with really high poll numbers and great accomplishments. Good job, Brian. So
Trump,
that was.
Don't you have enough to do? Don't you have enough to do, Trump? Come on, gee.
It's a very exactly. It's a very strange. But anyway, it became interesting. Let me just then because then Trump was on Air Force One, and then he talked a little bit more about this about Putin and Zelensky. So let's take a look at this. I don't know how good the audio will be here.
Oh, he's having a gaggle.
The gaggle, yes. He's obviously stealing our concepts.
Would you say your relationship with Vladimir Putin is at its lowest point right now?
No, I don't think so. I don't think he's going to go back on his word. You're talking about Putin. I don't think he's going to go back on his word. I've known him for a long time. We've always gotten along well, despite the Russia hoax. It's a hoax created by Clinton and Schiff and all of these lunatics. And that really was a dangerous point. That was a very dangerous thing they did to this country. It was a pure, unadulterated scam, hoax. But no, I think he'll be okay. But if he isn't, I was disappointed in a certain way. Some of the things that were said over the last day or two having to do with Zelensky, because when he considers Zelensky not credible, he's supposed to be making a deal with him, whether you like him or you don't like him. So I wasn't happy with that. But I think he's going to be good. And I certainly wouldn't want to put secondary tariffs on Russia, but if they were put on, it would not be very good for them. You know, we put secondary tariffs on, as you know, in Venezuela.
And then he talked a little bit more.
Yeah, but I mean, Donald Trump, you're not making a deal with Zelensky. You're making a deal with Putin.
Yes, that's right. But then he's trying to. Well, that's where he talks again about this with this thing with Zelensky. Where just let me find this place. Where? All right, this should be it.
it's a psychological deadline. If I think they're tapping us along, I will not be happy about it.
Do you think they are right now?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think he wants to make a deal. And I think Zelensky, by the way, I see he's trying to back out of the rare earth deal. And if he does that, he's got some problems. Big problems. We made a deal on rare earth. And now he's saying, well, I want to renegotiate the deal. He wants to be a member of NATO. Well, he was never going to be a member of NATO. He understands that. So if he's looking to renegotiate the deal, he's got big problems. Go ahead.
So at the end of the day, we're kind of left somewhat baffled. He's issuing these threats against Russia. He's saying he's going to do, you're going to have these secondary tariffs, secondary sanctions. It's not even clear what he means by that. We hit them with 25%, these secondary tariffs. And then he issues a threat against Zelensky saying that, well, he's going to have big problems if he walks away from the rare earth deal, even though that deal that is being offered is way beyond anything to do with rare earths. And yet he keeps talking about the rare earths. So in the end, you're kind of left a little bit baffled by what is he trying to do here? He's just throwing these things out, issuing these threats, but it doesn't seem to have any rhyme or reason to it. I mean, he wants something. He wants some kind of a deal. And I think at this stage, he seems to think that, well, if I can just threaten somebody, cajole somebody into getting a deal, then I'm going to get somewhere. But basically, his negotiations are not leading anywhere.
I'm just going to play with words here. He doesn't want a deal. He wants a win.
Yeah,
he wants to win.
Yes, I think so.
Do you think he cares, George? Do you think he cares where Lugansk, what side of the border Lugansk is? I do. Really? Come on, everyone. He's frustrated because, the United States is still a very, very powerful country. Let's never underestimate that.
Right, of course.
And he thinks that as president of the United States, he can stomp his foot and people get in order.
Right.
And that's what he's frustrated with. He's like, I've already invested time in this. Let's get it on. I have other things to do. I got it. I'm on the clock. This is his approach. Okay.
But I agree with that. But his problem is that it's becoming increasingly his project.
Yeah, that's right. It's exactly. No longer Biden's project, everyone.
No longer, exactly. Having made this decision of making it his project, he said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to resolve this. I've got good relations with Putin. I've got relations with Zelensky. I can do it. I'm the master negotiator. It's now his project. So where he had the option in the beginning of saying, this is Biden's project, I don't want anything to do with it, let the Europeans, they care so much about it, let them deal with it. He could have done that. It's politically, it would have been quite risky for him, but he could have done it. That would have been a consistent position. America first. We're washing our hands of it. He didn't do it, and now he's kind of stuck with this, sort of threatening Putin, and then a few minutes later he's threatening Zelensky. And I don't think it's going to get him very far.
Well,
now,
also,
go on.
He called Zelensky a dictator. What is it?
A dictator. He said it was a dictator.
Yeah, it was two words, but he dictatorial. Yeah. You said that recently, Donald Trump.
Right.
Okay. And now you're saying,
Well, I'm not happy that he's calling his legitimacy.
At first blush, when I came across this earlier, I just thought maybe Trump wanted to kind of like balance things out and threaten both sides, like he's the great mediator. The problem is that structurally, the United States cannot be the mediator because it is backed one side to the hilt. Okay.
Right.
I think he's frustrated by that because it's in his mind, it's not his war, it's somebody else's war. And he's here to kind of clean it up and move, get it off the agenda because he's got a lot of other things to do. But structurally, that's the problem with his so-called negotiating, because he's negotiating on the behalf of one side, and it doesn't. That's why he's running into these kind of roadblocks. Steve Witkoff is the only one that seems to kind of get that. The rest of these clowns, they can't, because it's a third rail. You can't go there. Okay.
No, but I think the problem arose really from the start by essentially he promised over and over again during the election that he was going to resolve this, that he was going to do it, he was going to solve this. There was no need for him to do that. There was absolutely no need for him to promise that, and so therefore he has now got himself right in the middle of it, and so at this stage he gets blamed for being pro-Russian, obviously. Oh, he's doing Putin's bidding, he's pro-Putin, he loves Putin and whatever. And then, he doesn't even get the credit for threatening Russia. He's now threatening Russia with these secondary sanctions, going to do this, and this to Russia. He doesn't get any credit for that. So it's like he's not really gaining anything. And the MAGA people who kind of supported him in the expectation that he was going to walk away from Ukraine. I mean, I and I think you as well. I think we were both skeptical that he was just going to walk away. That I think it was always unlikely he was just going to walk. He could have done
if he was,
but it was unlikely that he actually would do it.
If he were to do that, he had to do it on day one.
Yeah, okay? I think exactly. Yeah.
He had to do it on day one and take the loss. I mean, honeymoon period, 100 days. Absolutely solid backing from his base. He could have potentially, we'll never know, taken the hit, but now, no. He didn't. He hasn't put in his toes into this. He's hip deep in it now.
Yes.
Okay, yes. George. It's something that you and I have just commented on before. What is Zelensky still being run? But MI6, CIA. I mean, that's one thing I can't figure out. Okay. Because he is a surrogate. We all know that. Okay. Right. So is he still getting talking points, encouragement from people in the Trump administration?
Well, I think look. Clearly, I think as we were talking yesterday with that New York Times article, there's clearly within the bureaucracy, there is very powerful pro-Ukraine, pro-Zelensky forces still absolutely embedded in the Pentagon, the CIA, who are feeding stuff to the media. I think that the Europeans are probably talking to him and say, look, Trump is very mercurial. You don't know which way he's going to go. Look, just in one day, he says one thing and then he says something completely different a few hours later. Just stay put. Don't say anything. Don't get into any arguments. Don't insult him or anything like that. Which Zelensky has difficulties holding to that. I mean, his attack on Witkoff, wasn't particularly
because he's never been taught to be disciplined.
Exactly, he's very undisciplined. Yeah, but I'm sure Starmer, Macron, and the Americans are telling him just don't get in their face. Just stay put, be very polite, very respectful, and then Trump will come around. Eventually Trump will come around and realize the wisdom of our policy. So I think he's being run by probably MI6, probably by the French, and by forces within the United States. And I think they just think just stay put. And I don't see. We talked before. I don't see the Timoshenko, Poroshenko, Zaluzhny option. I just don't see it. I don't see that anyone is really promoting their candidacies very much. I think if they do hold an election, I think only on the basis that he wins overwhelmingly. I think otherwise, I don't think his handlers would agree to any kind of an election.
Yeah, they would never agree to an election where he could lose. Come on.
Exactly. Now,
but this last point here. The resistance is winning. They're winning because Trump is getting very frustrated. This is what they want him to be. Yes. They want him to be angry, erratic, contradictory.
Right.
This is exactly what they wanted.
Yes, yes. That's right. Now, he said there that he's going to have a phone conversation with Putin this week. I have my doubts that they're going to have a phone conversation because I don't see at this stage what are they going to talk about. I mean, it'll just be the same as before. We talked about the Black Sea Grain Initiative. We talked about the energy infrastructure. What's there to talk about right now? I mean, when the Russians have already said they're not going to agree to a 30-day ceasefire, a complete 30-day ceasefire. They're not going to agree to that. So there's no point in getting on the phone and telling Putin to, hey, can you please agree to this? They're not going to agree to this. So I don't think there's going to be a phone conversation this week.
I don't either. But towards what end?
Right. Yeah. I mean, now what?
Oh, and also this secondary sanctions and tariffs and all that. It doesn't cut really much mustard here. It's just like,
yeah,
okay.
I don't quite see it. I mean, so
well, you're gonna it'll be the impact on Russia, I suppose, in one way or another, it will be an annoyance or even painful. I don't know every single variant, but secondary means on other countries. Do you think?
Well, that's right, and
that's where you're gonna think. Do you really want to enrage everybody?
Well, it sounds like they probably do. I mean, I think obviously they're going to hit China. Will be the one that they're going to hit, and it's possible that they're going to try and do that. Though that's not. Yeah, I mean, they may do that, and they have talked. The Treasury Secretary, said, "Hey, well, the problem with the sanctions is that they haven't been enforced enough, and so they may try to really push for the sanctions."
Meanwhile,
the problem with that is there's a reason why the Biden people didn't push for sanctions that quickly, because there's a real danger that you could just bring the whole world economy
exactly. And meanwhile, everyone, let's go down the hall to another room in the school. Oh, how's the mending U.S.-Russia relations going? Because at that room, at the other end of the hall, we're getting sanctions thrown at it. See how this all caves in on
That's right. That's right. No, I think if they start doing that, if they start hitting, as what he's saying, is oil, the oil market, you're going to have a real problem. You're going to have a real problem. And the only reason why there hasn't been a huge economic meltdown in the world is that essentially the sanctions were quite loose. I mean, they allowed all kinds of,
exceptions, cutouts.
Exceptions, exactly. That's the word. Exceptions. You got or you don't want to do it because if you really crack down, you could bring the whole world economy to a juddering halt. So they turn a blind eye to gas. The gas flows back into Europe. Oil flows into Europe. All that is happening. So all the talk, we've cut ourselves off from Russian oil and gas. No, you haven't. And everyone knows that you haven't. The Americans know that you haven't. But so it's the only way that they've been able to maintain this sanctions regime. So if they really decided we're really going to crack down, they're running a serious risk.
Meanwhile, threats are being made against Iran, and the oil markets are watching. I mean,
listen,
these things are all connected.
Right.
That's why.
Okay, go on.
Go ahead. No, it's just all connected. That's it. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to bring up the Iran thing, which is very interesting because he starts talking that he's going to bomb Iran. Now, leave aside the fact that the last person was talking about bomb Iran was John McCain. Remember that when he had that little ditty, bomb Iran. So now Trump is doing that. So he now embraced the sort of the John McCain foreign policy, which is kind of a very strange for somebody.
I think I wrote to you. I said Mike Pompeo and John Bolton made it into the administration after all.
Yeah, no, that's right. And but what is also interesting in what he is in the position that he's now taking on Iran is that he goes contrary to last week's report of the global threat assessment, because this was the global threat assessment presented before Congress by the leaders of, the Trump administration's intelligence community. They're all there. And if you read this global threat assessment, just what it says about Iran. So here's is the annual threat assessment, and here they're saying Iranian investment in its military has been a key plank of its efforts to confront diverse threats and try to deter and defend an attack by the United States or Israel. Iran continues to bolster the lethality and precision of its domestically produced missile and UAV systems, and it has the largest stockpiles of these systems in the region. It considers them as critical to its deterrence strategy and power projection capability. And then it says, then it goes on that Tehran intends for its expanding relationship with other U.S. adversaries and the global South to mitigate U.S. efforts to isolate the regime and blunt the impact of Western sanctions. And so everything it's saying here is that Iran is acting defensively. And then he goes on, we continue to assess Iran is not building a nuclear weapon and that Khamenei has not reauthorized the nuclear weapons programs he suspended in 2003, though pressure has probably built on him to do so. In the past year, there has been an erosion of a decades-long taboo on discussing nuclear weapons in public that has emboldened nuclear weapons advocates within Iran's decision-making apparatus. Khamenei remains the final decision maker over Iran's nuclear program, and to include any decision to develop nuclear weapons. And then Iran very likely aims to continue R&D of chemical and biological agents for offensive purposes. Iranian military scientists have researched chemicals that have a wide range of sedation, dissociation, and so on. And then it says, Iranian leaders recognize the country is at one of its most fragile points since the Iran-Iraq war, which probably weighs on their strategic calculus and confidence in their approach toward the region, the United States, and U.S. partners. They face growing political, social, and economic and regional pressures, leaving Iran increasingly vulnerable to regime threatening instability and external interference. Now, the thing about this threat assessment is that they're saying Iran is entirely defensive. Everything Iran is doing is defensive. It is basically trying to deter attack from Israel and the United States. That's the U.S. own intelligence community says that basically they don't have any aggressive intent. They're trying to essentially ward off aggression from others, United States and Israel.
And when it was, there was a congressional hearing about it. At the same time, the signal thing came out, and it was, you could see the Republicans wanted to talk about the report, and the Democrats wanted to talk about a signal. But what was uniform is that, what about Iran and the bomb? And I would have just said, have you read the report? Have you read it? Here, it's on page 57. Okay, why are you asking us? We already told you in the report. This is one of the. It's mind-boggling. Yeah, but what about the bomb? How many days, weeks before they have the? Well, we said in our report.
That's right, and that's what's so extraordinary. So here is Trump, who's making these threats, and you have to then ask, well, why are you making all of these threats? There is no Iranian threat. Iran is defensive. It is entirely about trying to preserve itself in the face of continuing U.S. aggression, which has been going on for more than 40 years, about 45 years now, and Israel. And yes, Trump is then talking about, we're going to bomb Iran with a view to what exactly? What is that going to do? Now, if you bomb Iran, that's only going to encourage the Iranians to move toward nuclear weapons. Maybe they have them. Who knows what their nuclear capability now is? Maybe they have them. Maybe they don't. At least the intelligence people in the U.S. don't think they have them. But if you attack them, it's going to be very hard to justify. No, we can't. We can't have a nuclear weapons program. Of course, you need an absolute nuclear weapons program. You're getting bombed by the Americans and by the Israelis.
If you're going to shoot the king, you better not miss. Okay,
Yeah.
George and I have talked about this. Hypothetically, what if there was a massive bombing campaign against Iran? Would it inflict regime change? Doubtful, very doubtful. Would Iran strike back at the Straits of Hormuz, hit all the Gulf countries? Probably not. It doesn't want to. I mean, if you destroy the world economy, then you destroy yourself. I mean,
That's right. I agree.
But then we'll go into this moment of suspended disbelief.
Right.
I would build a bomb then.
No, you have to. I mean, you have to.
You have to. So here we go again, everyone. To try to avoid Iran having that capacity, you're forcing them in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to.
And the intelligence community, as George just read to us, those are their words, not George's words. No, it's defensive what they're doing.
That's right. The defensive, they're in the business of deterring attacks. And that's incidentally, everybody who has studied Iran, will say that they're basically in the business of preserving themselves. That's all that they're concerned with, to preserve themselves.
And the revolution.
And the revolution. Now, they're also, they don't like Israel. I mean, we know that. They regard Israel as a source of instability and worse in the Middle East. However, they have no intention and have never had any intention of waging a war against Israel. It's very risky, and because above all, it threatens to bring United States in, and Iran does not want to get into a war with the United States. But now that Trump is threatening Iran, and we got to remember he's threatening Iran for no real reason. I mean, it's like Iran hasn't done anything wrong. It's the United States that walked away from that joint comprehensive plan of action.
And the same president.
It was Iran that walked away from it.
And it's the same guy.
Right. It's the same guy. That's
why we go back to it. What I found interesting and important in that Signal chat is not that, it was exposed and Jeffrey Goldberg. I could care less about these people.
Yeah.
But they want to, the whole Yemen caper, to use George's favorite word, which I like now, is to go after Iran. It has nothing to do with Yemen. It is more as a conduit to enact a regime change strategy in Iran.
Yes.
How many Western ships are being destroyed in the Red Sea?
Exactly. Yeah. It isn't happening. But again, this is what is so strange, really, about Trump as to why he has done this. Why has he got himself into this, issuing essentially these the threats to Iran? And Iran is doing something that's not unlike what the Russians are doing. They say, well, we're not going to be bullied by these threats. We don't have diplomatic relations, so we're not going to have direct talks, but we can maintain indirect talks, and you can address your issues to us indirectly. But then we're not going to talk about essentially abandoning our nuclear program. I mean, the nuclear energy program, which is what, and we talked about this thing last week. Mike Waltz, who said that they have to give it up, completely give up their nuclear energy program. Well, that's a total violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and I don't know how they can enforce that, because no other country will go along with the United States forcing Iran to give up its nuclear energy program. So the Iranians are just saying, well, okay, if you want to discuss something, we'll discuss it, but we're not going to discuss it while you're threatening to bomb us, and we're not going to discuss it while you're maintaining this maximum pressure campaign.
Well, so why is he doing it, George? He's doing it for Israel.
For Israel.
That's it. I'm sorry. It's very straightforward.
That's right. And then, of course, you have to ask, well, why is he doing it for Israel? What I mean, it's because it's just not his issue. He seems to have embraced this issue at some point. I think during his first term, and then in the interim between the end of his first term and the beginning of his second term, in the interim, he seemed to have taken a reasonably moderate position on Israel. Remember, he was critical of Netanyahu. He's talked about Netanyahu being asleep at the switch, allowing that attack to occur. Now he's gone back to his position during the first term, which is anything for Israel. I'm ready to do whatever you want.
How is that America first?
It's not.
It's not.
It's not.
As a matter of fact, maybe I'm going to say something that will really demonetize us here. The United States and Iran should be friends.
I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be.
Why can't, what is the fundamental reason why they can't be friends?
There isn't. Other than bad feelings about the end of the Pahlavi dynasty. But that's again 45 years ago. And states are supposed to be concerned with national interests. Issues about who did what to whom 50 years ago. You're not supposed to worry about things like that. Pahlavi and the hostages. But that all ended. That the hostages thing, that 1981. So that's already 44 years ago.
Yeah. Well, what about Rumsfeld and providing Saddam with chemical weapons to kill hundreds of thousands of Iranian? I think they're not over it, but it's not an impediment. Okay.
Right. No, that's right. Now, okay, the Americans have traditionally been friendly with Saudi Arabia, but I don't quite see why you can't be friendly with both Saudi Arabia and Iran. Why does it have to be one or the other? That doesn't say. Okay, the Saudis probably wouldn't be particularly happy if America started getting very friendly with Iran, but so what? Who cares about that? That's America. I mean, you make your own decisions as to what is in your national interest, not in what's interest of Riyadh. Now, Israel would be very unhappy. So again, it's Israel.
That would be the party that would be very unhappy. Because isn't it great when Muslims kill Muslims? That's what Israel wants in the region.
That's right. Anyway, so let's look at our page on locals, which is the one that Buddy and Apple are very concerned with, because that's where the people who put money into the tip jar, that's...
Yes, I was thinking about this when I was out in the city here. We have to deal with the lobby called Big K9. Okay, we have to appease the Big K9 lobby, heavily influencing George and I. Okay?
That's right.
Under the influence of Big K9.
Big K9, yes.
And what's important here, and maybe not clearly understood, but they're not big, but together, collectively, it's Big K9.
Exactly, collectively. That's collectively they're absolutely ferocious, because they do things in packs, and when they're in a pack, then you don't have a chance. You're done.
If you want to use what is the madman theory, well, then you have to deal with Apple, because totally.
The madman theory.
It's the madman theory.
So anyway, Judy Hotchkiss. Judy, always very good to see you, Judy. And thank you always for your interesting observations and insights. And thank you, as always, for your generosity. And Judy says, if Kamala had won, the U.S. would be leading the pack with the political opposition jailings. I think that's right. There's no question. I think that if Kamala had won, they would have gone after Trump and his supporters with a vengeance. I mean, there's no question about that. Especially Trump. I mean, Trump had already been convicted in New York of 34 felony counts. There's no question that judge would have sentenced Trump to prison. He would have absolutely sentenced Trump to prison, and then the case in the New York, the civil case, would have, he would have been in serious trouble of coming up with this huge sum of money, and they would have gone after all of the the Trump supporters, in a way that to put 2021 in the shade. I think it would have been absolute crackdown, and to make sure, just as we've seen with Marine Le Pen, just as we've seen in Romania, to make sure that never happens again. No populist nationalist leader and his supporters ever come to power again. So that don't ever anybody try doing this again, because you're going to end up in prison just like Trump. And Trump would just basically he would just die in prison. I mean, they would hit him with 10 years, which at his age, that's pretty much a life sentence.
Yeah, but let's not overlook what the Trump administration is doing with civil liberties and these green card holders and this whole ridiculous anti-Semitism witch hunt, which I find odious and disgusting. And I think absolutely right. If Kamala Harris and her henchmen had come to power, I think there would be a political pogrom. Okay, but what Trump is doing with the civil liberties right now is it's just odious. I mean, I'm just disgusted by it. I've seen these videos, the masked men, unmarked cars, and it's just, it's not right. It's wrong. Okay.
No, I
due
agree.
process. Due process.
Yes,
if you write it, I didn't know that writing an op-ed is a threat to national security. It
obviously isn't. However, it is one thing to get kicked out of the country. Another thing to be thrown into prison. I mean, I think you get kicked out.
But George, you get my point, okay?
No, I agree with you. I mean, it is ridiculous and to do this, and ridiculous to do this for another country. I mean, that's what's so obnoxious about it. I mean, if you were going around saying, I don't like all these green card holders, because when they say things like America's a genocidal country, or they say America's a fascist dictatorship, and therefore we're taking away their green cards. Now, obviously, it's a violation of the First Amendment. You're entitled to say America's genocidal. You're entitled to say anybody is a fascist country. But the idea of doing this on behalf of another country, that's truly creepy. Because when Marco Rubio says, "Well, we don't want any troublemakers here," okay, you can make that argument. We don't want troublemakers here. If you're a guest,
yeah, but it doesn't hold up to legal scrutiny, and he knows it. Okay.
No, it doesn't, because that's right. I mean, it's because once you're in the country, you do have First Amendment rights. You may not be an American citizen, but you do have First Amendment.
I think it's a few weeks old right now, but Glenn Greenwald did an entire video on free speech for aliens. It's brilliantly done. I encourage everybody to take a look at it. Okay. And he is a lawyer by trade, okay? Yeah. And he very powerful message, okay? Right. I could not even get close to explaining it the way he did.
That's right. So on a different subject, NKMRD says Holodomor is pretty much the last argument that comes after a long argument or discussion with some pro-Ukraine person. However, questioning that is like opening the whole entire barrel of World War II again, which might be good, but only if we can get together all the puzzle pieces, I think. So yeah, no, that's right. I mean, that's part of the litany of anti-Sovietism, which becomes a kind of anti-Russianism. So it's like somehow the Holodomor, and then that blends in to anti-Russianism. Well, of course, they would hate the Russians. Until you say, well, what did it have to do with Russia? I mean, that was the collectivization, the famine that came through this insane collectivization policy. That was Soviet. That was Soviet communist policy. Policy. Yeah, go on.
Okay, and that's like making the argument that Politburo was exclusively of Russians. It wasn't. Right. It was all kinds of people, including Ukrainians. Okay,
exactly, and it was, of course, it was insane. And a lot of these communist ideas were absolutely insane. Collectivization of agriculture was an insane idea. But Mao's ideas were also insane. Mao he wasn't Russian. He wasn't anything to do with Russians. These ideas of collectivization, the Great Leap Forward, the one-child policy, all the rest, all of that were just absolutely insane. I mean, the communists were driven ideologically and were absolutely catastrophic for their countries. And so it had nothing to do with Russia. And the idea that the Holodomor was somehow imposed by Russians on Ukrainians is ludicrous and deliberately deceitful.
And no serious scholar of that would stand behind this propaganda. Okay.
Yes, that's right. And Judy Hotchkiss says Trump could very well want to talk to Putin about his trade deal, as reported in Bild, Financial Times, and Moscow Times. A potential deal could give the U.S. control over Russian gas flows via Nord Stream 2, with American investors, including businessman Stephen Lynch, allegedly expressing interest in Nord Stream 1 and 2 operation. A US-led consortium had drafted the outlines of a post-sanctions deal with Gazprom so that Americans would regulate the German gas tap and earn money at the same time. So there have been these stories about Americans are interested in working with the Russians in getting Nord Stream off the ground. I mean, it's a very interesting stories, but I do have to wonder whether would the Russians go along with it, because ultimately the Russians would then no longer be in control of their pipelines. I mean, I think, in that case, I think the American consortium would be in control. So I don't know how feasible this project really is.
But remember, why was Nord Stream built? Because Russia didn't have control of the pipelines going through Ukraine.
Exactly.
Okay? I don't see that they're going to repeat that. Okay, a consortium where Gazprom has 51%, and a consortium of other American companies, I don't think they would object to that. But they would have to have a majority control. Okay,
they would have the majority control, but there'd still be the question of the pipelines. I mean, that was the key, is that who controls the pipelines. I would have thought the Russians would want to maintain the control of the pipelines.
51% ownership. Okay, I mean, no veto over there. I mean, because they want administrative control. If they want partners to invest to make money, I don't think they have an objection.
I think so. I mean, the idea is very interesting. I mean,
the Americans blow it up, and
that's right. But that's right. So it has been reported in Bloomberg and elsewhere, and it's certainly a very interesting idea. I mean, what's interesting is also that the Europeans are absolutely adamant against it, which again is very odd, because this will be gas going to Europe, and gas coming from Russia into Europe, and they're absolutely against it, even though gas is coming from Russia to Europe. I mean, it's like it's happening now. I mean, this would be much cheaper. And would be, and would be done much more easily, rather than the way it's done now, which is it's very circuitous, and then it's the Turk stream, and then via liquefied natural gas. Here it would be flowing directly to Europe, and it would cost a hell of a lot less.
Well, I mean, what about this plan? I mean, Russia has 51% ownership of the pipelines. Once it gets to Germany, once it goes across the border, if you want to have distribution companies and stuff I mean, Russia's work is done then. Okay, once it enters the market, you bought it. You do what you want with it. You want to have an American partner? That's your business. Well, why should we care?
That's right.
We're the delivery guys. We bring it. We producers, and we're the delivery. Once it gets into your system, it's up to you what you want to do with it. Go nuts.
That's right. That's right. Well, then I mean, just to go back to Judy's question, would that somehow be something that Trump and Putin would discuss in the upcoming phone call? So we're not going to talk about this consortium and making some money on Nord Stream.
Yeah, well, if I were on that call and I was Putin, I'd say, but you're the people that blew it up, and now you want to get in on the action here. I mean, you need to kind of explain yourself. Number one, admit you did it. Okay. Number one, admit it. Okay. Now, let's have some catharsis here. But Judy, no, this is a periphery issue. Putin was up in Murmansk, and he was talking about investment into the Arctic, including the Americans, including the Europeans, everybody. Everybody, let's do this together. Don't militarize it. Let's all work together. That's not reported in the news at all. That's why I encourage people. It's boring and it's dry, but go to TASS.com and they report all of these things. It's really boring, but it's, today President Putin was in Murmansk he was on a nuclear powered submarine and he was talking about how global investment in the Arctic. That doesn't make the New York Times, does it?
Right. No, that's right. I mean, I think ultimately, before any of these business plans can be discussed and people can start talking about investing money, I think the war has to come to an end. I think that I don't think we're going to talk about any of this until the war is brought to an end. So these are ideas, you can toss them around and so on, but until the war comes to an end, no one's ready to sink any.
And George, all the more so considering how Europe has just lost its collective mind. I mean, I do think that people in the Trump administration say, once this thing's over, the Europeans are so pissed off and mindless right now. Why don't we jump in, and take the remaining money off the table? They don't want to have anything to do with it. What's stopping us? I think that's the kind of thinking. There's money on the table that's being left.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Anyway, our time is up, Peter. So it's as always very interesting, a lot of fun. Thank you for questions. Thank you, Judy. Always very interesting and intriguing questions and observations. And the issue of the dogs is very highly salient. I mean, you said when they're in packs, they are ferocious, scary. So we will be back next week. Nothing terrible has happened so far. I don't want to jinx it, but we'll be back. Thank you, everyone who has joined us. See you next Monday. And remember, I'm doing my solo tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time.
One last point. This is the first time we've ended a live stream where there's still daylight. So
that's true.
It's getting the days are getting longer. Thank God. Okay.
That's very important. Very important consideration. Thank you. All the best. Goodbye.